Charlotte Hayes gripped the edge of the wooden pew so hard her knuckles bled white, and not one soul in Crimson Creek moved to help her. She had walked into that church with her chin held high, and within 10 heartbeats, the whispers had cut her down to her knees. 5 summers gone. 5 summers of lies spreading like prairie fire. And the woman they called a sinner had never done a single thing they accused her of. Then the church door swung open, and the most dangerous cowboy in the territory walked straight toward her pew. Before this story goes any further, please subscribe to the channel and follow Charlotte's journey all the way to the end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from today. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's step back into Crimson Creek. Charlotte Hayes pressed her palm flat against the prayer book in her lap, and still her hands would not stop shaking. "That's her," someone whispered from the pew behind. "That's the Hayes girl. 5 years gone," another voice hissed. "And she has the nerve to walk back in here in a Sunday dress." "A Sunday dress." A woman gave a small, cruel laugh. "After what she's done." Charlotte did not turn her head. She did not blink. She kept her eyes on the cross above the pulpit, and she told herself the way she had told herself every morning for the last 3 weeks that she had done nothing wrong. "Mrs. Harmon," came the preacher's greeting at the front door. "Good to see you, Reverend." "Mr. Tate, morning, sir." "Morning." The door opened and closed, opened and closed. Every footstep on that pine floor reminded Charlotte that she had chosen the back row for a reason. She could hear the pew creak as a mother 2 rows ahead leaned over and murmured to her daughter, "Don't you look back at that woman. You hear me?" "Yes, Mama." Not once. Charlotte's throat burned. She had known it would be bad. She had sat up at her aunt's bedside the night before turning the high collar of her dress in her fingers, and she had told Aunt Eleanor, whose breath came thin and shallow under the quilt, that she would go to church in the morning. She had promised. "You don't have to, child," Eleanor had whispered. "I have to, Aunt. They will be cruel to you. I know. Your mama would not want you hurt." "My mama is dead," Charlotte had said softly. "And if I don't go this Sunday, I will never go again. And I want to go, Aunt. I want to sit where she used to sit." That pew third from the back left side had been taken this morning by the Carter family. Emily Carter had looked up from her hymn book and met Charlotte's eyes the moment she stepped through the door, and a slow, terrible smile had spread across Emily's mouth. Charlotte had turned and walked to the last pew instead, and now she sat alone while the whole town of Crimson Creek filled up the rows in front of her. "She was in Dodge, I heard." "No, Abilene. It don't matter where. It matters what she was doing." "They say she was with outlaws." "They say she was worse than that." A child's voice, high and innocent. "Mama, what did the lady do?" "Hush, hush now." Charlotte closed her eyes. A drop of something wet slid down her cheek before she could catch it, and she wiped it away with the back of her glove so quickly that she almost tore the stitching at her wrist. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. The organ began. Then the door opened one last time. There was a change in the room. It was not a sound exactly, it was the opposite of sound. The whispering at the front stopped first, then the whispering in the middle, and by the time Charlotte lifted her chin, the only thing she could hear was the quiet scrape of a man's boots on the floor. "Lord have mercy," a woman breathed. That's Ethan Callahan. He hasn't been in this church in 6 years. He ain't here to pray, I can tell you that." Charlotte did not look back. She did not dare. She kept her eyes forward, and she felt rather than saw the long shadow that stretched up the aisle toward her. The boot stopped beside her pew. "Miss Hayes." His voice was low and it carried. Charlotte turned her head a quarter inch. "Mr. Callahan." "This seat taken." She could hear the whole town holding its breath. She could hear Emily Carter's hymn book shut with a soft, furious snap 3 rows ahead. Charlotte folded her hands. "No, sir." Ethan Callahan tipped his hat to her slow, deliberate, and lowered himself onto the bench at her side. He was a big man, and the pew creaked under him, and he set his hat on his knee, with the brim turned up the way a gentleman might. He did not look at the preacher. He did not look at the crowd. He looked straight ahead at the cross, and he said nothing at all. A man behind them made a small, furious noise in his throat. "Callahan," a voice hissed. "Callahan, you move yourself." Ethan did not move. "You know what she is." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Just that." "You sit there," the voice went on, "and you are telling this whole congregation, I reckon," Ethan said without turning around, "that the Lord will tell this congregation what he wants them to hear. And I reckon he won't be needing your help to do it." Someone gasped. The preacher at the pulpit cleared his throat very loudly. "Brothers and sisters, let us stand for the first hymn." The congregation rose. Charlotte stood with them slower than the rest, her knees trembling under her skirt. Beside her, Ethan rose too, and she felt his sleeve brush against her shoulder, and it was the first human kindness she had felt in 3 weeks. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. She would not cry. Not in front of them. The service ended the way it began, with Charlotte Hayes walking alone down a pine floor. Ethan had stood when she stood, let her pass first, and followed her out at a distance, the way a man might follow a woman he did not know, so that no one could say anything more than what had already been said. The midsummer sun hit Charlotte like a slap the moment she stepped outside. The whole churchyard was waiting men, with their thumbs hooked in their belts, women with their bonnets pulled forward against the light. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody nodded. A little boy waved, and his mother caught his hand and pulled it down, and Charlotte pretended not to see it. Emily Carter was waiting too, of course. Emily stood at the bottom of the church steps with her parasol on her shoulder, and she smiled as Charlotte came down. "Charlotte? Charlotte Hayes. Look at you. All grown up." "Good morning, Emily." "You came back." "I came back to see my aunt." Emily tilted her head. "And how is Miss Eleanor? I hear she's poorly." "She's resting." "Resting." Emily's smile did not move. "Well, I do hope she has peace at the end. A woman ought to have peace when she's watched what she's watched." Charlotte's hand tightened on her prayer book. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Oh, Charlotte, honey, don't run off. I only meant it must be hard on her, to have you home, after everything." "After what, Emily?" "Well," Emily's eyes lit up bright as cut glass. "You know." "I don't." "Don't you?" "Say it then." A small crowd had gathered now. Nobody wanted to miss it. Emily's smile sharpened. "I only meant the things people say. About where you've been. About what you did. To that poor Callahan boy especially. After your father—" "My father is buried," Charlotte said. "I know, dear. Say his name with respect, or don't say it." "Oh." Emily laid a hand over her heart. "Oh, Charlotte, I would never. I only meant— Miss Carter." Ethan's voice came from the top step. Emily's smile cracked just a hair. "Mr. Callahan, I believe the lady said, excuse me. I heard what you was only." Ethan came down the steps slow and steady, and he did not stop until he was at Charlotte's shoulder. The crowd took a small step back, as if a gun had been drawn. Ethan never touched her. He just stood there. "Miss Hayes," he said, "may I walk you to your wagon?" Charlotte's throat would not open. She nodded. "Ma'am?" Ethan tipped his hat to Emily Carter. "You have a blessed afternoon now." He did not wait for a reply. Charlotte walked and Ethan walked beside her, and the churchyard parted around them without a sound. They were at the wagon now, at the far end of the lot, where the dust settled thick in the summer heat. Charlotte kept her eyes on the harness in her hands. She could not look at him. "You didn't have to do that." "I know I didn't." "I don't need—" She stopped. She breathed. She tried again. I am not asking to be rescued, Mr. Callahan." "I wasn't rescuing." "Then what were you doing?" "Sitting in church." She made a sound that was almost a laugh, and it hurt her chest. "In the back pew." "Best pew in the house." Mr. Callahan. Ma'am. They are going to talk about you now. Ethan's mouth moved, not quite a smile. They've been talking about me for 6 years, Miss Hayes. Don't reckon one more Sunday is going to do me in. It's different when it's with me. Yes, ma'am, I know. She looked up at him then. She had not looked at his face, not directly, since she had been 16 years old, and he had been a tall, quiet boy, with her father's hand around his throat. He was older now, and there was gray at his temple that had not been there before, and his eyes were the same. Her hands began to shake again. "Ethan," she whispered. "Miss Hayes, do you—" She could not finish it. "Do you believe what they say? About me?" "No, ma'am. You don't know where I've been. Don't need to. You don't know what I've done. Miss Hayes." He took off his hat slowly and held it against his chest. "I knew you when you was 12 years old. I knew your mama. I knew what kind of blood is in you. And whatever they are saying in that churchyard, I reckon I'll trust the blood over the mouths." Charlotte's eyes filled. She looked down fast. "Don't be kind to me, Mr. Callahan." "Ma'am, I cannot bear it. Please, not today." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. She heard the leather of his glove creak as his hand closed around his hat. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He helped her up onto the wagon bench without another word. He did not take her hand. He offered his arm, and she used it, and he stepped back and touched his hat again, and stood there in the dust while she lifted the reins. "Mr. Callahan, ma'am, why did you sit beside me?" Ethan looked up at her. The sun was behind him. "Because somebody ought to have," he said. And Charlotte Hayes drove home with her back straight and her hands steady on the reins until she was out of sight of the town, and then only then she let the first sob come. "You went." Aunt Eleanor's voice was a thread of itself. She was propped up on 3 pillows, her hair long and white down her shoulders, and her eyes were the only part of her that still looked young. "I went, Aunt." "Was it bad?" "It was bad." "Come here, child." Charlotte sat on the edge of the bed and took the old woman's hand. The bones were light as sparrow bones. "Tell me." "Aunt, tell me." So Charlotte told her. She told her about the pew and the whispers and Emily Carter on the church step, and the way the little boy's mother had pulled his hand down. She told her about her father's name and how she had said it out loud in the churchyard for the first time in 5 years, and how the word had tasted like rust in her mouth. She did not tell her about Ethan Callahan. Not at first. Aunt Eleanor watched her face. "Child." "Yes, Aunt." "What are you keeping from me?" "Nothing." "Charlotte Ann Hayes." Charlotte's shoulders dropped. "Ethan Callahan sat beside me." Eleanor was still. Then very slowly the old woman smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in days. "Did he now?" "In the back pew." "In the back pew." Eleanor's eyes were wet. "Oh, child." "Aunt, he was always a good boy. He walked me to the wagon." "Did he?" He said—" "What did he say?" Charlotte pressed her hand to her mouth. "He said somebody ought to have." Eleanor's fingers closed on Charlotte's wrist with a strength the old woman should not have had left. "Listen to me now." "Yes, Aunt." "That town is going to eat you alive, Charlotte. You know that. You knew it when you came back." "I know. They will say things about that man now, too. Worse things. Because of you." "I know. He knows it, too." "Aunt." "He walked into that church knowing it." Eleanor's voice cracked. "Child, do you understand what he did for you?" Charlotte did not answer. She could not. Eleanor pulled her hand away and laid it back on the quilt and closed her eyes. "You be careful, girl," she whispered. "You be careful with that man. He has already paid once for loving a Hayes woman. Don't you make him pay again." Ethan Callahan rode home that afternoon the long way through the high grass past the creek where the cottonwoods leaned. His ranch hand was waiting at the gate when he came up the road. "Boss?" "Jim?" "Heard about church." Fast news? Town's already talking. Let them. Boss. Ethan swung down. Jim, don't. A man named Harlan Carter was at the feed store an hour ago, saying things. What kind of things? The kind of things a man says before he does something. Ethan pulled the saddle off his horse and laid it across the rail, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet. He said them loud enough for half the street. Boss, if you stand with that girl, I know Jim. You will stand against this whole town. Ethan turned around. His eyes were steady and a little tired. Then I reckon, he said, I will stand against this whole town. He walked toward the house and Jim took off his hat and held it in both hands and looked after his boss the way a man looks at somebody he has known a long time and has only just understood. Inside the house, Ethan set his hat on the table and stood a long moment with his hands flat against the pine. He closed his eyes. He could still hear the sound of that pew creaking under him, and the small, almost soundless breath Charlotte had let out when he sat down. 6 years he had stayed out of that church. 6 years he had kept his head down and his mouth shut and let the town of Crimson Creek decide what kind of man he was. One Sunday, that was all it had taken. One Sunday, and he had undone all of it. He opened his eyes. He was not sorry. The first stone came through the kitchen window at sunrise on Monday. Charlotte was standing at the stove with a kettle in her hand when the glass shattered and she dropped the kettle on the floor, and the hot water hissed across the boards, and for a long second she could not move at all. "Charlotte!" Aunt Eleanor's voice called thin from the bedroom. "Charlotte, child, what was that?" "Nothing, Aunt." "Charlotte." "Nothing. I broke a jar." She bent down and picked up the stone. It was the size of a man's fist, wrapped in a scrap of brown paper, and somebody had written 2 words on the paper in a heavy, angry hand. "Go home." Charlotte's throat closed. "Charlotte Ann." "I'm coming, Aunt." She pushed the stone into the pocket of her apron and stepped over the wet boards and went into the bedroom, and she sat down on the edge of the bed with a smile pasted on her mouth the way her mother had taught her to do. "I broke the blue jar," she said, "the one with the chip in the lip." Eleanor's pale eyes searched her face. "Liar," the old woman whispered. "Aunt." "Show me your hands." "Aunt, please." "Show me." Charlotte held out her hands. They were shaking. Eleanor closed her eyes for a long moment. "What did it say?" "Aunt." "What did the note say, Charlotte?" "It said go home." "This is my home." "I know, Aunt. This was my sister's home before it was mine. You were born in the back room of this house. Do you hear me?" "I hear you." "You are home, child." Charlotte's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together hard, and she nodded, and she stood up before her aunt could see her cry. "I have to get the medicine this morning," she said. "Dr. Hadley said Monday. Charlotte, I'll be back before noon. Take the side road." "Aunt, I am not going to sneak." "Take the side road, girl, for me." Charlotte paused at the doorway. She looked back at the small, brave old woman in the bed, and she could not say no. "Yes, Aunt," she whispered. "And Charlotte." "Yes. Do not speak to Emily Carter today. Do you understand me? Not a word." "I understand." Mr. Dooley's general store smelled the way it had smelled when she was a little girl, of sawdust and peppermint and coffee beans in a tin scoop. Charlotte stood at the counter with her list in her hand, and Mr. Dooley stood behind the counter with his apron twisted in his fingers, and he would not meet her eyes. "Miss Hayes?" "Mr. Dooley." I can't." "I beg your pardon?" "I can't sell to you today, Miss Hayes." Charlotte lowered the list slowly. "Mr. Dooley, this is my aunt's prescription. Dr. Hadley left word." "I know he did." "She needs the laudanum. She is very ill." "I know, Miss Hayes. Lord knows I know." "Then, Harlan Carter was in here last night." The name landed in Charlotte's chest like a second stone. "Harlan Carter?" "Yes, ma'am." "What did he say to you, Mr. Dooley?" He said that any man who sold goods to a Hayes woman would find his credit gone by the end of the month. His credit. At the bank, at the stockyard, everywhere. Harlan Carter does not own the bank, Mr. Dooley. His brother-in-law does. Charlotte's hand tightened on the list until the paper crumpled. Mr. Dooley. Miss Hayes, please. Mr. Dooley, you knew my mother. I knew her, Miss Hayes, and God rest her. You let me sit on this counter when I was 4 years old. You gave me peppermint. Miss Hayes. My aunt is dying. Mr. Dooley closed his eyes. I am sorry. Mr. Dooley, I have 7 children, Miss Hayes. She stood there one more second. Just one. Then she folded the list very neatly and slid it into her pocket on top of the note that said, Go home. And she walked out of that store with her head up, and she did not cry until she was on the wagon seat with the reins in her lap. Miss Hayes? The voice came from across the street. Charlotte looked up with her eyes still wet, and there was Ethan Callahan standing by the rail of the hitching post with his hat in his hand. He had seen everything. She could tell by his face. Mr. Callahan. She wiped her cheeks fast. I'm fine. No, ma'am. I said I'm Miss Hayes. He crossed the street. He walked the way a man walks who does not care who is watching. What did he refuse you? It doesn't matter. Miss Hayes. Medicine, for my aunt. Ethan's jaw set. Wait here. Mr. Callahan, no. Wait here, Miss Hayes. Ethan. Mr. Callahan, please, they will. But he was already inside the store, and the little bell over the door was still ringing, and Charlotte sat on the wagon seat with her heart thumping against her ribs and watched the doorway. She could not hear what was said. She heard Ethan's voice low and even, and then Mr. Dooley's higher afraid. She heard the word Carter. She heard the word hang. She heard a long silence. Then the bell rang again, and Ethan came out with a brown paper sack in his arms, and he laid it gently beside her on the wagon bench. Laudanum, he said. Flour, sugar, tin of the coffee your aunt likes. Ethan, don't. You paid for this. I did. You can't, Miss Hayes. He put both hands on the wagon board and leaned down, and his voice was very quiet. If that old woman goes without medicine because Harlan Carter wants to squeeze this town, then I ain't the man I thought I was, and I'd like to go on thinking I am. Charlotte's eyes filled again. They will come for you for this. Let them come. Ethan. Miss Hayes, drive home. Take care of your aunt. I'll handle Harlan Carter. You don't know what he's like now. Ethan's mouth moved in something that was almost a smile. Ma'am, he said, he don't know what I'm like now either. Harlan Carter came up the Callahan Road that afternoon with 2 men behind him. Jim saw them first from the barn, and Jim came up the steps of the house 2 at a time. Boss. I see 'em, Jim. 3 of 'em. I see 'em. You want the rifle? No rifle. Boss? Jim? Yes, sir. Go on down to the creek and mend the south fence. Boss, I ain't leaving you. That ain't a question, Jim. Jim went. Slow, angry, but he went. Ethan stepped out onto the porch with his hands empty and his hat low, and he waited until the 3 horses drew up in the yard and the dust settled around their hooves. Harlan. Callahan. Long ride for a social call. It ain't social. Didn't reckon it was. Harlan Carter was a thick man with a red neck and pale eyes, and he swung down off his horse with a grunt and a slap of leather. His 2 men stayed mounted. You bought that woman's medicine today? I bought a neighbor some medicine. She ain't your neighbor Callahan. Her aunt lives 3 miles east of my fence line. In this country, that's a neighbor. Don't you play slow with me. I ain't playing. You sat beside her in church. I sat where the Lord let me sit. Harlan spat in the dust. I am going to tell you this one time, Callahan. You walk away from her. Is that right? She ain't what she pretends. She ain't what her mama was either. Careful now, Harlan. You know what she did. I don't, and neither do you. Her daddy tried to hang you. Her daddy is buried. And you are going to bury yourself right next to him if you keep sitting in her pew. You hear me, Callahan?" A long silence. Ethan came down off the porch, slow. 1 step. 2. "Harlan?" "What?" "Take your horse." "Callahan, take your horse, Harlan. Take it off my land. And you tell your niece Emily that the next time she runs her mouth about Charlotte Hayes in my hearing, I am going to answer her back in front of the whole town. And she ain't going to like the answer. You, go home, Harlan." Harlan Carter stood very still in the dust. The 2 men on the horses did not move. One of them had his hand near his belt, and Ethan had not once looked at him, and somehow that was worse than if he had. "You'll regret this, Callahan." "Probably." "You'll lose everything." "Probably." "For a woman who—" "Harlan." Ethan's voice dropped. "Don't finish that sentence in my yard." Harlan finished it anyway under his breath as he climbed back up on his horse. Ethan heard the word. Ethan's hand did not move. He watched the 3 of them ride out, and he watched until the dust had settled on the road, and only then did he let his shoulders drop. Jim came up from the south fence at a run. Boss, what did he—" "Saddle the bay, Jim." "Boss." "Saddle the bay. I'm riding to town." "Boss, you just told him—" "I know what I told him, Jim. Saddle the horse." By Wednesday, the whole town knew. By Wednesday, the word had gone around the saloon and the post office and the back pew of every church, and Emily Carter had a new smile on her face every time she passed a woman on the wooden walk. "Did you hear?" "I heard." "About the Callahan man, riding out to the Hayes place every evening." "Every evening." "No." "For supper, they say." "For supper, they say. And what else?" A cruel laugh. "Poor man. He never did have his sense about him, not since her daddy—" "Hush now. Here she comes." Charlotte walked past them with her basket on her arm and her bonnet pulled low, and the women fell silent, the way a coop of hens falls silent when a fox crosses the yard. Charlotte did not look at them. She had not looked at any of them in 4 days. The post office was the worst. Mrs. Alder was the postmistress, and Mrs. Alder had been in the choir with Charlotte's mother, and Mrs. Alder slid the 1 letter across the counter to Charlotte without a word. But she met Charlotte's eyes. And there was something in her face, some small trapped sorrow that almost made Charlotte reach across the counter and take her hand. "Mrs. Alder." "Miss Hayes." "Thank you." "Miss Hayes." There was— The old woman glanced at the door. There was a second letter. A second. "For you. Last week." "I didn't receive it." "No, Miss Hayes, I know you didn't." Charlotte's breath stopped. "What do you mean?" "Someone took it from the bag, Miss Hayes, before it got to my counter." "Who?" "I don't know." "Mrs. Alder." "I don't know, child, I swear it. I only know that the bag came in on Thursday, and that letter was listed on the driver's manifest, and by the time I opened the bag, it was not inside." "Who was here that day?" "A lot of people." "Mrs. Alder. Emily Carter was one of them." Charlotte's hand closed so tight on the counter edge that she felt a splinter drive under her thumb. "Who was the letter from Mrs. Alder?" "The manifest said it came from Abilene, and the name on it was a Mr. E. Callahan." Charlotte stood very still in that post office, and the light from the front window shifted a little on the wood floor, and her mouth went dry as paper. "Ethan wrote to me." "Yes, Miss Hayes." "Ethan wrote to me in Abilene." "I believe he did." "And somebody took it." "Yes, Miss Hayes." Charlotte did not remember walking out of the post office. She remembered being on the wagon. She remembered driving. She remembered nothing of the road between town and her aunt's front gate. Ethan was already there. He was in the yard, sleeves rolled up, fixing a board on the porch that had been loose for a year. He looked up when she drove in, and the smile on his face died when he saw hers. "Miss Hayes." She climbed down off the wagon so fast she almost fell. "Ethan Callahan." "Yes, ma'am." "Did you write to me?" "Ma'am." "Did you write to me? In Abilene, 4 years ago." Ethan lowered the hammer. "Yes, ma'am." I did. You wrote to me. Once. Only once. Once was all I had the courage for, Miss Hayes. Charlotte's hand went to her mouth. I never got it. He looked at her a long moment. I figured. No, Ethan, no. I never got it. I thought you hated me. I thought after what my father did, after the engagement, I thought you wanted me gone. I left because I thought, Miss Hayes, I thought you were glad I left. Ethan set the hammer down on the porch rail very slow. Miss Hayes, I was not glad. Ethan, I wrote that letter 3 times before I sent it. Ethan, I wrote it in November after your father passed. I wrote that I did not blame you. I wrote that I did not believe a word of what the town was saying. I wrote... He stopped. He looked down at his boots. I wrote that if you ever came home, there'd be a man here who would be glad of it. Charlotte made a sound that was not quite a word. I never got it. I know that now. Ethan, 4 years. 4 years I thought... I know. Who took it? I don't know. I do, Charlotte whispered. Ethan's head came up. Mrs. Alder said Emily Carter was in the post office the day it came. A long, terrible quiet. Emily. Emily. Ethan closed his eyes. Emily, who is set to marry her cousin Harlan's boy next spring. Ethan? Emily, whose daddy owns half the grazing lease east of the creek, which my grandfather left me a quarter share in. Ethan, what are you saying? Ethan opened his eyes, and they were very, very quiet. I am saying, Miss Hayes, that somebody in this town did not want you to come home. And somebody in this town did not want me to be able to tell you to come home. And I reckon that somebody had a reason. And I reckon the reason is sitting on about 300 acres of summer pasture. Charlotte stared at him. The land. The land, Miss Hayes. It was never about me. It was about your aunt's land and my grandfather's share, and what happens to both of them when your aunt is gone and you are chased out of this country. God help me. Miss Hayes. Ethan, my aunt. Yes, ma'am. My aunt has been sick for a year. Yes, ma'am. They have been waiting for her to die. I reckon they have. Charlotte's knees nearly went. Ethan caught her elbow before she hit the porch step, and she did not pull away from him, and for a long moment he just held her arm, and she just breathed in and out, and tried to keep the world still. Charlotte. It was the first time he had said her name. Charlotte, listen to me. Yes. I am not going to let them take a thing from you. Ethan. Not a thing. Not 1 acre. Not 1 cow. Not 1 more day of your aunt's peace. They will hurt you for it. I know. They have already started. I know, Charlotte. Harlan came to your ranch. He did. What did he say to you? Nothing I haven't heard. Ethan. Charlotte. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. Ethan was quiet a moment. His hand was still on her arm, light as a feather now, as if he were afraid she might break. Charlotte Hayes. Yes. I lost everything the day your father sent you out of this county. I just didn't know I'd lost it. Her eyes filled all over again. Don't say that. It's the truth. Ethan, don't say things to me that I can't hold up under right now. Please. Yes, ma'am. Please. Yes, ma'am. He let go of her arm gentle and stepped back and took his hat off and held it against his chest. Charlotte pressed both hands to her face and breathed through her fingers. From inside the house, Aunt Eleanor's voice called thin and bright. Charlotte, is that the Callahan boy out there? Charlotte laughed through her tears. It was a small, broken laugh. Yes, Aunt. Well, bring him inside, girl. I'm not going to die with a man standing on my porch. Ethan's mouth twitched. Miss Hayes. Mr. Callahan. May I come in? She nodded. She could not speak yet. He went up the steps first and stopped at the door and waited for her. And Charlotte Hayes wiped her face with the back of her glove and climbed the porch of her aunt's house, and for the first time in 5 years she walked into her own home with a man at her shoulder who was not afraid of the whole town of Crimson Creek. It was only later, much later after supper, after Aunt Eleanor had held Ethan Callahan's hand and called him a good boy, and closed her eyes to sleep, that Charlotte walked Ethan to his horse in the blue summer dusk, and reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out the stone with the note wrapped around it. "Ethan?" "Yes." "This came through my kitchen window Monday morning." Ethan took the stone. He turned the paper over in his hand. His face did not change, but his hand closed slowly around the stone until the paper crumpled inside his fist. "Charlotte." "Yes." "Go inside. Lock the door." "Ethan." "Lock it, Charlotte. And tomorrow—" "Tomorrow what?" "Tomorrow you do not go into town without me." "Ethan." "Charlotte, please." She looked up at him in the blue half-light, and she nodded once, and she went inside. She bolted the door behind her. She leaned her forehead against the wood, and she heard him out in the yard mount his horse, and she heard him sit there a long moment before he rode away. He was watching the house. She could feel him watching it. Out on the road, Ethan Callahan opened his fist and looked again at the two words on the paper, and then he looked at the stone, and then he put both of them in the pocket over his heart and turned his horse toward home. He did not go home. He rode past his own gate without stopping, and he rode down the long, pale road toward the lights of Crimson Creek, and the moon came up behind him the color of old bone. The saloon door swung open at 10:30, and every man at the bar turned around. Ethan Callahan walked in with the stone in his hand. "Harlan." Harlan Carter was in the back corner with 3 men and a bottle, and he looked up with the slow red smile of a man 3 drinks in. "Callahan." "Well, twice in 1 week." "Stand up." "Sit down, Callahan. Have a drink." "Stand up, Harlan." The saloon went quiet. The piano stopped. The man behind the bar set his rag down and reached very slow for the shelf underneath. Ethan walked across the floor with his boots loud on the pine, and he stopped 3 feet from Harlan's table, and he opened his fist and let the stone drop on the wood. It hit with a crack that made 2 of the men flinch. "What's that?" Harlan said. "That came through Charlotte Hayes's kitchen window Monday morning." "Did it?" "With a note on it. Imagine that." "Harlan." "I don't know nothing about a stone, Callahan." "I didn't ask if you did." "Then why?" "I am telling you, Harlan. I am telling you right now in front of these men, in front of Mr. Pike behind that bar, in front of the Lord Almighty. If another stone comes through that woman's window, or a torch comes up her road, or 1 hair on that old woman's head gets touched, I will come find you. And I will not be polite about it." Harlan's smile was thin now. "You are threatening me, Callahan." "No, sir, I am promising you. In front of witnesses." "In front of witnesses. I'll have the sheriff on you." "Go ahead." "I mean it." "Harlan." Ethan leaned down with both hands on the table. "Go get him. I'll wait." Harlan did not get him. Harlan sat in his chair and did not say another word, and Ethan picked up the stone and walked out of that saloon the same slow way he had walked in. The piano did not start again until the door swung shut behind him. At the bar, old Mr. Pike let out a long breath and took his hand off the shelf. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "That Callahan boy has come back." On Thursday morning, the town was already talking about what had happened in the saloon, and by Thursday afternoon, the town was talking about something else. Mrs. Alder, the postmistress, had given her notice. No warning, no reason. She had simply hung her bonnet on the hook behind the counter, locked the drawer, and walked home. And by supper, it was whispered all up and down the main street of Crimson Creek that Emily Carter's daddy had paid Mrs. Alder a quiet visit the night before. She was the only one who'd talk. She was the only one who knew. Now she's gone. Now there ain't a witness. Charlotte heard it from the woman who sold her eggs at the fence line, a widow named Mrs. Pratt, who had not yet decided whether she was afraid of the Carters or ashamed of herself, and who was leaning that morning toward ashamed. "Miss Hayes." "Mrs. Pratt. I don't got much time, but I want you to know, Mrs. Alder was threatened." "Threatened? Her pension, her house, everything." "By who?" "By the Carter boys. Through the bank. Charlotte closed her eyes. Mrs. Pratt. Yes, child. Why are you telling me this? Because my sister was your mother's friend, and because I have watched that Carter girl tell lies since she was 9 years old, and because... The old woman looked down at the eggs in her basket. Because your Aunt Eleanor prayed for my Henry when he was dying, and I have not forgotten it. Mrs. Pratt, Miss Hayes, there is a dance Saturday night. A dance. The summer dance, at the town hall, the one your mama used to. I remember. They are saying the Carters will be there, in force. I wasn't planning to go. Miss Hayes. The widow stepped closer. If you don't go, you have already lost. Mrs. Pratt, I can't. You walk in that door, child. You walk in that door on the arm of that Callahan man, and you look every one of them in the eye, and you make them say to your face what they whisper in the street. You hear me. Charlotte's mouth trembled. You hear me, Charlotte Ann. I hear you. Your mama would walk in. My mama was braver than me. No, child. She was. No, child. She was exactly as brave as you are now, and you are going to find that out on Saturday. That evening, Ethan sat at Aunt Eleanor's bedside with his hat in his lap, and the old woman looked him over, the way a woman looks over a horse before she buys it. Ethan Callahan. Ma'am, you are going to take my niece to the dance on Saturday. Ma'am, You are. Miss Eleanor. Ethan. Ma'am, if I take her in that door, half of Crimson Creek is going to be lined up to finish what her daddy started. I know it. Miss Eleanor. Ethan Callahan. I am dying. Do not argue with a dying woman. No, ma'am. My niece has sat in the back of one too many rooms. Yes, ma'am. On Saturday night, she is going to walk in the front, and you are going to be on her arm. And you are going to dance with her under that chandelier the way my sister danced with my sister's husband in 1853. Do you understand me, boy? Ethan swallowed. Yes, ma'am. Good. Miss Eleanor. What? If something happens, something will happen. If something bad happens. Ethan. The old woman's hand closed on his wrist. You put yourself between her and it. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. That's what a man does. Yes, ma'am. That's what my sister's husband would have done for my sister, and that is what you are going to do for my girl. Yes, ma'am. Now go on, I'm tired. He stood up. He kissed the old woman's hand the way a son might, and he set her hand back on the quilt, and he walked out of the room with his hat against his chest. Outside the door, Charlotte was waiting. She had heard every word. Ethan. Charlotte. You don't have to. I know I don't. If we don't go... Charlotte? If we don't go, they cannot hurt us at the dance. They will hurt us anyway. Just slower. Her eyes filled. Ethan, I am afraid. I know. I have not been afraid in 5 years. Not like this. I know, Charlotte. I left this town because I was afraid, and I came back because my aunt was dying. And now I am afraid again, and there is nowhere left to go. Ethan took her hand. It was the first time he had taken it since they were children. Charlotte. Yes. I will be there. Ethan. I will be on your arm, and if it all goes bad, you get behind me. You understand? Ethan. You get behind me, Charlotte Hayes. I cannot let you... You will. For your aunt. Because she asked. Charlotte closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she did not wipe it away. Saturday. Saturday. Saturday came the way bad weather comes. Charlotte put on the blue dress her mother had worn to her wedding because it was the only dress in the house fine enough for the hall, and because she wanted her mother's ghost standing beside her when she walked in. Aunt Eleanor could not leave the bed, but she sat up on her pillows, and she watched Charlotte at the mirror, and she did not say a word, because the old woman had said all her words in the week just past. Ethan arrived at 8 in his father's coat. He had not worn that coat since his father's funeral. Charlotte. Ethan. You look... Don't. Like your mama. Ethan, please don't make me cry before we get there. Yes, ma'am. The town hall was lit up the whole length of the street. Every lantern in Crimson Creek had been lit, and the music was already going, a fiddle and a piano, and somebody on a washboard, and the wagons were lined along the rail 3 deep. Charlotte's hand tightened on Ethan's arm as they came up the steps. Ethan! Charlotte. I can't. You can. I can't, Ethan, Charlotte, look at me. She looked up. You are Eleanor Hayes's niece. You are Margaret Hayes's daughter. You were born in this county, and you are as much a part of this town as any one of them. You walk in that door with your chin up. You hear me, Ethan? You hear me, Charlotte? Yes? Good. He opened the door. The fiddle did not stop right away. The fiddle kept going for 2-3 more bars, and then the fiddler saw who had come in, and the fiddle wavered, and the piano stumbled, and the washboard stopped altogether, and for a long and terrible second, the only sound in the town hall of Crimson Creek was Charlotte Hayes's heartbeat in her own ears. Then the whispers started. She came. She came. With Callahan. On his arm. Lord in heaven. Lord Almighty. Emily Carter was standing by the punch table in a pale yellow dress, and Emily Carter set her cup down very slowly. And Emily Carter began to smile. Charlotte? Ethan, don't. I see her. Don't look at her. I see her, Charlotte. Emily crossed the floor. The crowd parted for her the way it parts for a woman who has been waiting all her life for a moment and means to use it. Charlotte Hayes, in your mama's dress. Emily. How bold of you. Emily, I did not come here to what? To fight with you. Oh, Charlotte, you didn't come to fight. You came to dance. On the arm of the only man in this county your daddy ever tried to hang? In front of the whole town? In your mama's wedding blue? A murmur ran through the room. Emily. Ethan said quiet. Mr. Callahan. Step aside, Miss Carter. Oh, I will not. Miss Carter. Mr. Callahan, I have something to say, and this whole town is going to hear it. The fiddler set the fiddle down. The room was still. Emily raised her voice. 5 years ago, this woman's daddy rode up to the Callahan ranch with a rope in his hand and 6 men behind him. Do you remember Mr. Callahan? I remember. Do you remember why, Mr. Callahan? Emily. Do you remember why? Tell them. That ain't your story to tell. I will tell it then, Mr. Callahan, since you are too much of a fool. This woman... Emily pointed, and her finger did not shake. This woman sat on your porch one summer night when she was 17 years old, and she told her own daddy, that you had laid hands on her. The gasp went through the room like wind through corn. Emily, Charlotte whispered. Emily, I never... She told her daddy you had ruined her. Emily, I never said that. She told her daddy, and her daddy got his rope, and her daddy rode up to your fence, and Mr. Callahan here was one breath away from swinging off a cottonwood tree when the sheriff came down the road. One breath. And this woman... Emily turned to the crowd. This woman let her daddy do it. This woman stood on her porch and watched him ride out with a rope, and she did not say a word to stop him. That is not true. Emily. And then she ran, to Abilene, to Dodge, to wherever she ran, and now her daddy is dead and her aunt is dying, and she has come home to sink her claws into the one man fool enough to forgive her, and you are all going to stand here and let her. Emily, stop. Look at her in that blue dress. Emily. Look at her. A man's voice from the back of the hall. Thick. Drunk. String her up. It was a joke. It was half a joke. It was not funny. Now hold on. 5 years too late. Her daddy tried to hang an innocent man. Maybe the family owes a debt. The crowd shifted. Not much. A few inches. But every man in that hall shifted his weight toward the front, and every woman in that hall took a step back, and Charlotte felt it, the way a rabbit feels the shadow of a hawk. Ethan, she whispered, get behind me. Ethan. Behind me, Charlotte. Ethan stepped forward. He stepped in front of her. He set his right hand flat against her waist and moved her a half step back, and he did not take his eyes off the crowd. And when he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it carried to the farthest corner of that hall. The first man who takes another step toward this woman is going to answer to me. Silence. I said what I said. The drunk at the back opened his mouth, and the man next to him put a hand on his arm, and the drunk shut up. Emily Carter. Mr. Callahan. That story you just told is the truth, is a lie. Mr. Callahan, every word of it is a lie. Ethan's eyes swept the room. Charlotte Hayes never told her daddy that I laid a hand on her. Charlotte Hayes never said a word about me to her daddy at all. Her daddy rode up my road that night because somebody told him I had been on Hazeland after dark, and I had been, and Charlotte knew why. Ethan, Charlotte breathed. I was courting her, and her daddy did not approve of me. And whoever ran to her daddy that night and put it in his ear that I was a danger to his girl, it was not his girl. It was somebody else. Who? Who? Mr. Callahan. Who? Ethan looked at Emily Carter. He looked at her for a long moment. I don't reckon, he said softly, that a man ought to accuse a lady in front of a crowd. Emily Carter went white. You, I have not said your name, Miss Carter. I would not, because that is not what a gentleman does. But I reckon if there is any soul in this room who was on the road between the Hayes place and the Callahan place on the night of August the 9th, 1871, you know in your own heart what you did. Mr. Callahan, I reckon you know it, Miss Carter. You cannot, and I reckon the Lord knows it too. Somebody, a woman at the side of the hall, made a small sound and put her hand over her mouth. Charlotte reached up. Her hand closed on the back of Ethan's coat. Ethan. Charlotte, not now. Ethan. Charlotte. Ethan, look at me. He turned his head. Just a little. She was crying now, the tears running free down her face in the lamplight, and her hand was a fist in the wool of his coat, and her voice was soft enough that only he could hear it. Ethan, Charlotte, if loving me destroys your life again, then I will leave tonight. Ethan's jaw locked. Charlotte Hayes. I will. I will walk out this door, and I will go to Aunt Eleanor, and I will be with her until she goes, and then I will get on a train, and I will never come back to this town. I will not take you down with me. Not twice. Not ever. Charlotte. I can't, Ethan. I can't be the thing that ruins you twice. Ethan turned all the way around. He put both his hands on her shoulders. The whole town of Crimson Creek was watching, and he did not care, and he did not lower his voice this time. Charlotte Ann Hayes, you listen to me. Ethan, I would rather lose this town than lose you twice. The hall did not breathe. I would rather lose this ranch and this land and every last acre my grandfather left me than watch you walk out that door alone one more time. Ethan, I let you leave once, Charlotte. I was 20 years old, and I was scared, and I let you leave. And I have paid for it every day since, and I will not pay it one more time. Do you hear me? I hear you. Do you hear me, Charlotte Ann? I hear you, Ethan. Then stand beside me. Yes. Say it. Yes, Ethan. Now. She stood beside him. She took his arm, and she turned to face the hall, and the tears were still on her cheeks, but her chin was up, and her mother's blue dress caught the lamplight, the way a flag catches the wind, and Charlotte Hayes looked at the town of Crimson Creek and did not look away. It was the old fiddler who broke the silence. He lifted the fiddle. He set the bow. And he began slow to play the waltz that had been her mother's favorite. One by one the piano came back in, and the washboard gentle, and somebody at the far end of the hall, an old man, a widower, a man Charlotte had not seen since she was a little girl, took off his hat and bowed his head in her direction. Evening, Miss Hayes, he said. Miss Margaret's girl. Evening, Mr. Whitfield. Would you do an old man the honor of a dance with your young man there, in memory of your mamma? Charlotte's eyes filled. Yes, sir. Ethan led her onto the floor. They danced. They danced in the middle of a hall that had 10 minutes before been ready to see them dead, and Emily Carter stood by the punch table with her face the color of paper and her yellow dress trembling. But the waltz did not get to finish. It got halfway through the second verse. And then the doors at the back of the hall banged open, and Jim, Ethan's ranch hand, Jim hatless, red-faced, his shirt half out of his belt, came running up the center aisle with his chest heaving. "Boss?" The fiddle caught out. "Boss, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Miss Hayes." "Jim." "What?" "Boss, it's the Hayes place." Charlotte's hand went cold on Ethan's arm. "What about it?" "Jim." "Jim, what about my aunt's house?" Jim took his hat off. He held it against his chest. He could not look at Charlotte. "There's smoke, Miss Hayes." "Jim." "There's smoke coming off the ridge. I rode past on my way into town, and I seen it off the east pasture. Rising up black, ma'am. Real black." Charlotte did not speak. She did not scream, and she did not cry. She only turned very slowly in her mother's blue dress toward the open door of the hall, and she ran. Charlotte ran out of the town hall in her mother's blue dress with the lamplight at her back, and she did not stop for the steps, and she did not stop for the wagons, and she did not stop for Ethan Callahan calling her name. "Charlotte! Aunt Eleanor!" "Charlotte, wait! Aunt Eleanor is in that house, Ethan." "Charlotte, stop! She can't walk, Ethan. She can't." "Charlotte!" He caught her by the arm at the hitching rail. He caught her hard. She whirled on him with her eyes wild. "Let go of me." "Charlotte, listen. Let go. You are not riding out there in a dress. You are not riding out there alone. You take the wagon. Charlotte, you take my horse. Jim, get her my horse." "Yes, sir." "Jim, give her the bay, give her the reins." "Charlotte, look at me, look at me." "Ethan, I am right behind you. You hear me? I am 2 minutes behind you." "Don't be more than that." "No, ma'am." She was up in the saddle before Jim could offer her a stirrup, her mother's blue skirt bunched around her knees, and she was gone down the main street of Crimson Creek at a gallop, and the whole town standing on the porch of the hall watched her go. Ethan turned on Jim. "The men." "Already sent a rider, boss." "Who?" "Tom. Tom's halfway to the ranch." "Good man, Jim." "Boss, Get the sheriff." "The sheriff ain't." "Jim, get the sheriff. I don't care where he is. I don't care if you have to pull him out of his bed or out of his whiskey. You bring him to the Hayes place. You bring him tonight." "Yes, sir." Ethan swung up on the second horse Jim had brought, and he was down the street after Charlotte before the townspeople on the hall steps had thought to close their mouths. In the doorway of the hall, Emily Carter stood in her pale yellow dress and watched the dust settle. Her father, old Mr. Carter, came up beside her and put his hand on her arm. "Emily." "Daddy." "Emily, what did you do?" "Nothing, Daddy." "Emily Louise, what did you do?" "I didn't, Daddy. I didn't do anything to that house." "Emily, was it your brother?" Emily did not answer. Her father closed his eyes. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "Lord have mercy on all of us." Charlotte smelled the smoke a mile out. She could see the glow above the ridge before she even crested the road, and the bay horse under her was lathered and snorting, and she drove him on with her heels and her hands and her whole heart. Come on, boy, come on." She came over the ridge, and her breath stopped. The house was standing. The house was standing. It was the barn that was burning, the barn and the smokehouse and the near end of the hay shed, the house itself, her mother's house, Aunt Eleanor's house. The house where she had been born was still on its foundation, with its windows dark and its door shut, and Charlotte sobbed once loud and threw herself off the horse before it had stopped moving. "Aunt Eleanor! Aunt!" She hit the porch running. She slammed her shoulder into the door. She fell through into the front room. "Aunt!" "Charlotte!" The old woman's voice. Thin, alive. Charlotte ran to the bedroom. Aunt Eleanor was sitting up in her bed with her white hair loose on her shoulders and a loaded pistol in her lap. Aunt, child. Aunt the barn. I know. Are you? I am fine. Come here. Come here, child. Come here. Charlotte fell on her knees beside the bed. She was shaking so hard she could not hold her aunt's hand. You have a gun. Your grandfather's gun. Aunt, I heard them come up the road, Charlotte. I heard the horses. I was awake. Who was it? 2 men. Aunt, they did not come to the house, child. Listen to me. They went to the barn. They threw their torch and they ran. You saw them? I saw one of them clear in the lantern light before he ran. Aunt, Charlotte, I saw Harlan Carter's boy. Charlotte closed her eyes. Emily's cousin. Emily's cousin, the older one, with the bad eye. Aunt, they meant to burn us out, child. They meant to kill you. Perhaps. Aunt, Charlotte, listen to me, listen. Before he comes. Before who comes? Your young man, listen, there is not time. The old woman's hand closed on Charlotte's wrist with a strength Charlotte had not felt in a year. Under the bed. Aunt, under the bed, child. The tin box. Get it. Charlotte dropped to her knees and dragged a dented metal box out from under the bed frame. It was tied with twine. The twine was dusty. Open it. Aunt. Open it, Charlotte. Charlotte untied the twine. She lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with ribbon, and a smaller packet wrapped in oilcloth, and a folded document on yellow paper. What is? The letters are from your father. From to me, the last year of his life. Read the one on top, Charlotte. Just the one on top. There isn't time for the rest. Charlotte pulled the top letter out with hands that shook. She unfolded it. Her father's handwriting. She had not seen it in 6 years. She read. She read it twice. Aunt? Yes, child. Aunt. I know. Aunt, this says my father was dying. He was dying, Charlotte. The doctor in St. Louis had told him in the spring of that year. He never told me. He never told anyone. He told me because I was his wife's sister, and because he was losing his mind toward the end and needed somebody. Aunt. He was sick, child. He was not in his right mind that night he rode out with the rope. Aunt. He loved you. He loved you, Charlotte. He was terrified of dying and leaving you alone in this country with no protection. And when somebody told him a cowboy had been on his land at night with his daughter. Emily. Read the second paragraph. Charlotte read. Her eyes filled. Aunt? Yes. He writes that the Carter girl came to our porch the afternoon before, that she told him she had seen Ethan with me, that she told him Ethan had, yes. She lied to him. She lied to a dying man, Charlotte. She put a rope in his hand. Why? The land, child. Your father's land and my land adjoin the Callahan grazing. Your father without his right mind and a young Callahan hanged for a crime the two families would have been ruined. And who do you think would have bought the land at auction the next spring? The Carters. The Carters. Charlotte sat back on her heels in her mother's blue dress with her father's letter in her hand, and she understood for the first time in 5 years that she had not been running from her father. Her father had never hated her. Her father had been a dying man holding a rope because a girl on his porch had told him a beautiful, careful, murderous lie. Aunt? Yes, child. He wrote to me. No, Charlotte. He could not, child. By November he could not hold a pen. I wrote the letter to you in Abilene for him. Do you remember the one that told you he had passed? I remember. I wrote what he had asked me to write, that he loved you, that he was sorry, that you were to come home. That letter said only that he had died. Then somebody cut the second page off, Charlotte. The room went very still. Who had that letter before me? It went through the town post. Who was in the post office? Child, who do you think? Charlotte pressed her fist to her mouth. Emily. Emily. Outside, hooves on the road. Fast. That's him, Charlotte whispered. Go to him, child. Aunt? Go. Ethan came over the ridge with 3 of his men behind him, and the first thing he saw was the barn half gone, the roof fallen in a ring of his ranch hands already on it with wet blankets and buckets from the creek. The second thing he saw was Charlotte on the front porch of her aunt's house in her mother's blue dress, alive, and holding a piece of paper. He nearly fell off the horse getting down. Charlotte. She's alive. Oh, thank God. Ethan. She's alive, Ethan. He crushed her against his chest. He did not mean to. He forgot to be a gentleman about it. He held her with both arms, and she held him back, and he felt her shaking through the blue wool of the dress. Charlotte? Ethan, it was Harlan Carter's boy. Where? In the barn. She saw him. My aunt saw him with her own eyes in the lantern light. Charlotte? And Ethan. Yes. My father did not hate me. Charlotte. My father never hated me. It was Emily. Ethan, it was Emily all along. She came to our porch that day and she told my father, I know, Charlotte. She told him that you had... I know. She lied to my father, Ethan. She lied to a dying man. She put the rope in his hand. Charlotte, I know. You know? Ethan pulled back. He looked down at her. His hands were on her shoulders. I knew that night, Charlotte. I knew when the sheriff cut me down. I saw her on the road riding back to her daddy's place as your father rode up mine. I saw her. You saw her. I saw her, Charlotte. Why did you never say? Because I was 20 years old, Charlotte, and because a Callahan had just been within a hair of swinging off a cottonwood, and because nobody in this county was going to take the word of a Callahan over a Carter girl in a church dress. That's why. Ethan, and because your father was dying, and because I did not want you to hate him in his grave for a thing that had been done to him. Oh, Ethan. I am sorry, Charlotte. Ethan. I am so sorry I did not tell you. Ethan Callahan, you beautiful fool. She put her hands on either side of his face. You let me think my father hated me. I thought you would come home and your aunt would tell you. I thought my aunt did not know what Emily had done. Not until tonight. Not until I brought her the story of the dance. Charlotte? It does not matter. Ethan. Ethan, it does not matter now. Hooves on the road. More of them. Charlotte turned. Coming up from town at a hard gallop was the sheriff, Jim beside him, and behind them, stumbling on foot bonnet, off white hair, loose Mrs. Alder, the postmistress. Sheriff Brooks, Ethan said. Callahan. Sheriff, her aunt's barn. I see it, son. Sheriff, the old woman saw the man who threw the torch. Hold on, Callahan. Hold on now, before we get to that. The sheriff swung down. He was an old man, gray and heavy, and his face was tired, the way a good man's face is tired when he has looked the other way one time too many. Miss Hayes? Sheriff. Miss Hayes, ma'am, I owe you an apology. Sheriff. I owe you a big one, ma'am, and I reckon tonight is the night I'm going to make it. Sheriff, what are you... Mrs. Alder here. The postmistress stepped forward. Her hands were twisting in her apron. Miss Hayes? Mrs. Alder? I came with the sheriff tonight because I cannot keep it any more, child. I cannot. Mrs. Alder. I did not know, Miss Hayes. I swear on my husband's grave I did not know at the time. I only knew last week. Knew what? Mrs. Alder closed her eyes. Your father's letter, Miss Hayes. The one your aunt wrote to you in Abilene. Yes. I gave it to Emily Carter. Charlotte's breath went out of her. You gave it to Emily. She came in the afternoon it was posted. She asked me to hold the letter an extra day. She said she had something to add to it. A condolence note. She said she had been like a sister to you and she wanted to send her love. And I thought it was a Christian thing. I thought, you gave her the letter. I gave her the letter, Miss Hayes. And when she brought it back to me, the seal had been broken. And I knew. But I told myself I did not know, and I posted it anyway. And I have thought of it every Sunday in that church for 4 years." Charlotte could not speak. "She cut a page out of it, Miss Hayes." "I know she did." "The page that said your father loved you." "I know." "I am so sorry, Miss Hayes. I am so sorry, child." Sheriff Brooks cleared his throat. "Miss Hayes?" "Sheriff, Mrs. Alder came to me with this 2 nights ago, after Harlan Carter had her pension threatened at the bank. She came to me and she told me what she has just told you. And I went to the bank yesterday morning, and I looked at who owns the paper on the note behind Harlan Carter's threat." "Who?" "Charlotte." The sheriff looked down at his hat. "The paper behind Harlan Carter's threat is held by a man in St. Louis who bought your aunt's mortgage in the spring." "What?" "Your aunt's mortgage, child, on this very house. It was bought up by a shell company 6 months ago, and the signature on the shell company papers, Sheriff, is a Mr. J. Carter. Emily's father." "Emily's father." Charlotte's legs nearly gave. Ethan caught her. "Ethan." "I got you, Charlotte. Ethan, they own our mortgage." "Not for long, Charlotte." "Ethan." "Not 1 day longer, Charlotte Hayes, I swear to you." Sheriff Brooks raised his voice. "Jim." "Yes, sir." "Ride to town. Wake up Judge Pritchard. Tell him I want a warrant for Harlan Carter for his nephew Matthew Carter and for Miss Emily Carter on charges of arson, fraud, intimidation of a federal postmistress, and Callahan, you listening? Yes, Sheriff. And for the charge of perjury by conspiracy in the matter of the hanging attempt on the Callahan Ranch in the summer of 1871. Ethan's chest went still. "Sheriff." "Son, after 5 years, Callahan, you had to live with it 5 years. That is my shame, not yours. I let that family run this county while I drank my coffee in my office and pretended I did not see. And I am an old man Callahan, and I am going to spend what is left of me setting that part straight. And I am starting tonight." Sheriff. "Jim, ride." "Yes, sir." Jim rode. By dawn, Harlan Carter was in a cell. By dawn, his nephew Matthew was in the cell next to him, with soot on his sleeves and a burn on his hand. By dawn, Emily Carter was sitting in the sheriff's front room with her pale yellow dress crumpled and her hair coming down, and the sheriff's wife was pouring her a cup of water, because Sheriff Brooks had said a lady did not go to a cell on a Saturday night, not even a lady who had done what Emily had done. And by dawn, just before the sun came up over the ridge, Aunt Eleanor called Charlotte to her bedside one last time. "Charlotte." "Aunt." "Come here, child." "Aunt, the doctor is coming. The doctor is—" "Charlotte." "Aunt." "Child, I am going." "No." "I am going, Charlotte. Don't make me lie about it. I have been holding on for a long time, and I only had one thing left to see, and I have seen it. Aunt, please. I saw him stand in front of you. Aunt, in the doorway. I saw him when you came in with his arm around you. I saw him, child." "Yes, Aunt." "That is what I waited for." "Aunt Eleanor." "Is he here?" "He is on the porch." "Bring him." Ethan came in with his hat in his hand. "Miss Eleanor." "Ethan Callahan." "Ma'am." "Come close, boy." He knelt by the bed. The old woman reached up slow and laid her hand on top of his hand, and she laid her other hand on top of Charlotte's. "Ethan Callahan." "Yes, ma'am." "Marry this girl." "Aunt," Charlotte whispered. "Don't you hush me, Charlotte Ann. I am dying, and I want it done right, and I want it done before I go." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. "Yes, what boy?" "Yes, I will marry her." "Charlotte." "Aunt." "Charlotte Ann Hayes, say yes to the man." Charlotte's tears fell on her aunt's hand. "Yes, Aunt." "Yes, what child?" "Yes, I will marry him." "Good." The old woman's eyes were wet. "Good. That is how it should have been. That is how it should have been 5 years ago, and no one can give you back those 5 years, child. But Lord in heaven, you will take every year after. Aunt. Charlotte. Yes. Your mama is so proud of you. Aunt. Your mama and your daddy both. They are waiting for me, and I am going to tell them. I am going to tell them tonight. Aunt, please. Hush, child. Hush now. She closed her eyes. She did not open them again. The sun came up over the ridge on Sunday morning. Charlotte Hayes sat on the front porch of her aunt's house in her mother's blue dress, and Ethan Callahan sat beside her with his coat around her shoulders, and neither of them spoke for a long time. Down the road a wagon was coming, then another, then a third. Ethan. I see them. Who is it? I think in Ethan. Charlotte, it's Mrs. Pratt. Mrs. Pratt. And Mr. Whitfield from the dance. And the preacher. And Charlotte, that is Mr. Dooley's wagon. Mr. Dooley. With his wife. And a basket. Charlotte stood up slow in her mother's blue dress. Mrs. Pratt climbed down from the first wagon with a covered dish in her hands, and she did not say a word. She climbed the porch steps, and she set the dish on the rail, and she put her old arms around Charlotte Hayes, and she held her for a long time. Your aunt, child. She is gone, Mrs. Pratt. I know. We knew when we saw the house. Mrs. Pratt. Child, we have been wrong, all of us. We have been wrong a long time, and we cannot give her back to you. But we are here. The preacher came up the steps next. He took his hat off. He did not look Charlotte in the eye at first. Then he made himself. Miss Hayes. Reverend. Miss Hayes, I have a great deal to answer for. Reverend. I let a story be told in my church that I should not have let be told. And I am sorry, child. Reverend. I will preach her burial, Miss Hayes, if you will have me. I will have you, Reverend. Mr. Dooley came up last, his wife on his arm, the basket between them. Miss Hayes. Mr. Dooley. Miss Hayes, It's all right, Mr. Dooley. No, ma'am, it is not all right. Mr. Dooley, I sold out my own soul for a line of credit at the bank, Miss Hayes, and I did it to your mama's girl, and I will carry that to my grave. Mr. Dooley. Ma'am, whatever you need, for your aunt, for the burial, for the house. Whatever you need from my store for the rest of your days, ma'am, there is no bill. Do you hear me? Mr. Dooley, you have children. I have 7 children, Miss Hayes, and I am going to teach all 7 of them tonight what a coward their father was on a Monday morning in July, and what kind of man he is going to be from this morning on. Charlotte's eyes filled. Thank you, Mr. Dooley. Miss Hayes. The town of Crimson Creek buried Eleanor Hayes on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of the summer heat, and the church was full from the front pew to the back, and nobody whispered, and nobody turned their face. Charlotte sat in the front row in black with Ethan Callahan on her right hand and Mrs. Pratt on her left. The preacher read the words, and when he was done, he looked up at the congregation of Crimson Creek, and he cleared his throat, and he said something he had not written down. Brothers and sisters, there is a woman in the front pew of this church today who was sat in the back pew of this church 3 weeks ago, and not one of us stood up for her. Not me, not you, not the man sitting next to you. Only one soul in this town stood up for her, and he was a soul this town had long ago decided was not good enough to be counted. I was wrong. You were wrong. We were all of us wrong. And that woman in the back pew that Sunday was more of a Christian in her silence than any of us were in our whispering. May God forgive us, and may she in his good time forgive us too. Charlotte did not weep. She had wept enough. She reached out and took Ethan Callahan's hand in front of the whole town of Crimson Creek, and she held it, and she did not let go. And on the hill above the churchyard, under the cottonwoods, where the summer wind was warm, Eleanor Hayes was laid down beside her sister Margaret. At last, and the last lie about the Hayes women of Crimson Creek went into the ground with her and did not come back up. Charlotte did not let go of Ethan's hand on the walk down from the cottonwoods, and she did not let go of it on the ride back to her aunt's house, and she did not let go of it on the porch where they stood together in the slow blue end of that summer afternoon. Ethan. Charlotte. I do not know what to do. With what, Charlotte? With any of it. Come here. She came. She leaned against him the way a woman leans against something she has been running toward for 5 years, and he put his arms around her, and neither of them spoke for a long while. Charlotte. Yes. You are going to rest. Ethan. You are going to rest. Charlotte Hayes. Tonight. You are going to sleep. And tomorrow we will sit down at that kitchen table and we will figure out the next thing. Not before. The mortgage. Tomorrow. The Carters. Tomorrow. My aunt's things. Charlotte. Yes. Tomorrow. She closed her eyes. She let herself be held. She said the word in her mind the way her aunt had told her to say it. Home, home, home. The next morning the sheriff came up the road before the coffee was done. Miss Hayes. Sheriff. Callahan. Sheriff Brooks. I got news, some of it good. Sit down, Sheriff. Coffee. Thank you kindly, ma'am. Ethan poured. The sheriff set his hat on his knee and rubbed his face with both hands like a man who had not slept. Harlan Carter confessed. Charlotte's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Confessed. Last night, around 2 o'clock in the morning. To what, Sheriff? To all of it. The arson at your barn. The buying of the mortgage under a false name. The threats to Mrs. Alder. The pressure on Mr. Dooley and half the other merchants in town. And Miss Hayes. Yes. The 1871 matter. The rope. The ride up to the Callahan ranch. Ethan set the coffee pot down very slowly. Sheriff. He did not throw the rope, Callahan. He wants me to tell you that. He was one of the 6 men behind your fence line that night. He was 19 years old. He did what his uncle told him to do. He did not. The sheriff cleared his throat. He did not know at the time that the story was a lie. That came later. And he never said. He never said. He was afraid of his own family, Callahan. And he was a weak man. And by the time he was old enough to be his own man, he had 5 years of silence behind him and did not see how to climb out of it. I ain't excusing him, son. I'm only telling you what he told me at 2 in the morning in his cell. Ethan did not answer. Charlotte reached over and laid her hand on his. And Emily. Miss Hayes. What about Emily? Miss Carter is not talking. At all. Not a word. She has been sitting in my front room since Saturday night, and she has not touched the food my wife has put in front of her, and she has not answered a question, and she has not wept Miss Hayes. Not once. Sheriff? Ma'am? I want to see her. Ethan turned his head. Charlotte? I want to see her, Ethan. Charlotte, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Sheriff Brooks looked at her for a long moment. Miss Hayes, I will not stop you. But I will ask you as a man who is old enough to be your grandfather, why? Charlotte was quiet a long time. Because, she said, I spent 5 years hating my father for something Emily Carter did. I spent 5 years thinking the worst of a dying man because a girl in a church dress lied on my porch. I have done enough hating for people who did not deserve it. I am not going to add one more. Miss Hayes, I am not going to forgive her, Sheriff. Do not misunderstand me. No, ma'am. But I am going to look her in the eye in the light of day one time, and I am going to let her know that I know, and that my aunt knew at the end, and that my mother in heaven knows. And then I am going to walk out of that room, and I am not going to think about her again. The sheriff's wife opened the door to the front room, and Charlotte walked in with Ethan behind her. Emily Carter was sitting in a straight-backed chair by the window. Her hair was down. Her pale yellow dress was dirty at the hem. She looked up when Charlotte came in, and for the first time since anybody could remember, Emily Carter had nothing at all on her face. Emily. Charlotte. I came to say a thing to you. One time. And then I am going. Charlotte. You killed my father, Emily. You killed my father as surely as if you had put a knife in him. He was dying. He was out of his mind. And you went to our porch and you told him a thing that a Christian woman does not tell a dying man. You put a rope in his hand. He rode up the Callahan Road with 6 men behind him because you told him to. And the shame of that almost hanging was what the last of him lived with until the last of him died. Charlotte, please. And you cut a page out of his last letter to me, Charlotte. A page that would have brought me home 4 years sooner. A page that would have let me sit at my father's grave and know he loved me. And you stole a letter from Ethan, and you watched me walk through that town for 3 weeks with my eyes on the ground, and you smiled at me from a pew that I should have been sitting in. Charlotte, Be quiet, Emily. Please, be quiet. I am not finished. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth. I am going to tell you what my aunt told me the morning before she died. She said the hardest thing in the world is to let the truth come late, because the life you would have had it come on time, is a life you cannot have now. Do you hear me? Emily nodded. I will never have those 4 years back. I will never have my father back. I will never have my aunt back. I will never have the woman I would have been had I not been chased out of this town at 17. That woman is gone. You killed her, Emily. Charlotte. But I am going to tell you a thing. Yes. I am not going to lie awake about you. Emily's chin trembled. I am not going to lie awake about you. I am not going to carry you with me. I am not going to let you have 1 more hour of my life than you have already taken. You are going to sit in that jail, and then you are going to walk out of it one day. And you are going to have to be Emily Carter for the rest of your days. And I reckon that is a punishment a judge cannot give you, and I reckon that is enough. Charlotte. Goodbye, Emily. Charlotte, wait. Goodbye. Charlotte turned and walked out of the front room of the sheriff's house, and she did not look back, and Ethan walked out behind her, and the door closed, and Emily Carter put her head down on her knees and wept for the first time in 5 years. They stood in the yard outside the sheriff's house. Charlotte was shaking a little. Ethan put his hands on her arms. Charlotte. Yes, that was the hardest thing I ever saw a person do. Ethan. I am proud of you, Charlotte Hayes. Ethan, take me home. Yes, ma'am. Take me home. He took her home. The wedding was in September. They waited until the heat had broken, until the cottonwoods had begun to turn, because Charlotte said her aunt had loved the early fall, and had always said that was the honest season, the one where the land stopped pretending. The preacher married them in the little white church on the hill. The same church that had whispered Charlotte down to the back pew in June. The same pew. Charlotte asked for it on purpose. She walked down the aisle in her mother's blue dress, the same one brushed clean and mended at the hem, and she stood at the front of the church and said her vows in a clear, strong voice that carried all the way to the last row, and the last row was full. The preacher asked the question, Do you, Charlotte Ann Hayes, take this man? I do. Do you, Ethan Jamison Callahan, take this woman? I do. Reverend, I have been taking her since I was 20 years old. The church laughed. It was the first time that church had laughed at a wedding in years, and Charlotte laughed with them, and the sound of her own laugh in that room was the sound of a thing coming back to life. Mrs. Pratt cried in the second pew. Mr. Dooley cried in the third. Sheriff Brooks stood in the back row with his hat in his hands, and did not cry, but only because he had done his crying the week before quietly in his kitchen when Mrs. Alder had forgiven him. Jim stood up as Ethan's best man, and when the preacher said the words, I now pronounce you husband and wife, the old fiddler in the choir loft, without being asked, lifted his fiddle and began to play the waltz that had been Margaret Hayes's favorite. The same waltz that had played at the dance in July. The same one that had been interrupted by Jim's feet running up the center aisle with news of smoke. This time the waltz got to finish. Charlotte and Ethan walked down the aisle together, and the town of Crimson Creek stood up in both pews and threw rice on them all the way to the door, and a little girl at the front, a child. Charlotte did not know. A child who could not have been more than 6 years old reached out and touched the blue of Charlotte's dress as she passed. Mama, the little girl whispered. Mama, she is beautiful. Yes, child, the mother whispered back. Yes, she is. They lived the first year in the Callahan house. Ethan's house, his grandfather's house, had 3 good rooms and a stove and a view of the creek where the cottonwoods leaned, and Charlotte made curtains for the kitchen, and she hung Aunt Eleanor's framed wedding cross above the mantel, and on cold mornings she stood barefoot on the pine floor and made coffee in her aunt's tin pot, and she was happy. But Charlotte Callahan, she was Callahan now, and it was strange for a long time to hear, it did not sit idle. She went to the schoolhouse that fall. It was a 1-room schoolhouse a mile east of town, and the schoolteacher was a young man from St. Louis who had been trying for 6 months to quit, and Charlotte walked in one morning in October and sat down in the back row and listened to him teach 12 children their multiplication. After class, she went up and introduced herself. "Miss Hayes?" "Callahan, ma'am. She's a Callahan now." "Mrs. Callahan, then. I was told. Forgive me." "You are going to quit, sir." "Ma'am. You are going to quit. I hear it in your voice. You do not want to be here, and these children know it." "Mrs. Callahan, I would like to take it over." The young man blinked at her. You would? I was educated in St. Louis for 4 years, sir, and in Abilene for a year after that. I can read Latin, and I can do sums, and I can teach a child to write a clean letter, and I would like this room, if the town will have me." "Mrs. Callahan." "Yes." "Ma'am, forgive me, the town. The town will have me. I am not afraid of the town anymore." "No, ma'am, I can see that you aren't." The town had. There was a meeting. There was a vote. Mrs. Pratt spoke up first, and the preacher spoke up second, and Mr. Dooley spoke up third. And when the vote was called, Charlotte Callahan was made the new teacher of the Crimson Creek School by a count that was not close. She taught there for 31 years. She taught the children of the town that had once whispered her out of its pew. She taught Mrs. Pratt's grandchildren and Mr. Dooley's youngest twins, and in 1883 she taught a pale, shy girl named Louisa Alder, the granddaughter of the old postmistress, and Louisa Alder grew up to be the postmistress of Crimson Creek herself. And in 1886, this is a thing Charlotte did not speak of for many years. A dark-haired boy of 14 came to the schoolhouse door with his cap in his hands and his eyes on the ground. "Ma'am?" "Yes, son." My mama said to ask if I could come to your class." "Who is your mama, son?" "Ma'am, she said." The boy's voice broke. "She said you would not want me here, once you heard her name." "Son." "Ma'am." "What is your name?" "Daniel, ma'am. Daniel Carter." Charlotte went very still. "And your mother is?" "Emily, ma'am." A long silence. "Come in, Daniel." "Ma'am?" "Come in. Take a seat. 3rd row next to the Pratt boy. You will be quiet, and you will be polite, and you will do your sums. And nobody in this school will say a word to you that is not kind because I will not have it. Do you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Welcome to my class, Daniel." "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan." She taught him for 4 years. She never once said to anyone, not Ethan, not Mrs. Pratt, not the boy himself, what it cost her the first month to mark his papers. But she marked them. And when Daniel Carter graduated her schoolroom in the spring of 1890, he was the finest writer of letters of any boy in that class, and he left Crimson Creek and went east to a university. And he wrote to his old teacher every Christmas for the rest of her life. And she wrote back. Ethan built the ranch. He built it the way his grandfather had planned it and never finished, because his grandfather had died too young and his father had died too tired. The Callahan place grew through the 80s quietly, steadily, the way a thing grows when a man knows what he is doing and has nothing to prove anymore. Ethan hired Jim as his foreman, and he hired Mr. Whitfield's grandsons as his hands, and in 1889 he hired a young cowboy up from Texas who had no people, and he gave the boy a bunk and 3 meals and a fair wage, and the boy stayed on the Callahan place for 40 years and called Ethan Sir until the day Ethan died. They had 3 children. A boy first in the spring of 1878. They named him James after Ethan's father. A girl in 1881. They named her Margaret Eleanor after both of Charlotte's lost mothers. Charlotte wept the day the child was born and held her against her chest for an hour and would not give her to the doctor to be weighed. A second boy in 1884. They named him Samuel after the sheriff, because Sheriff Brooks had stood up for them when nobody else had, and because the sheriff had died that winter, and Charlotte had wanted his name alive in her house. The children grew up on the Callahan ranch. James took over the ranch in his time. Margaret Eleanor Maggie married a doctor from Kansas City and moved east, and wrote her mother a letter every Sunday for the rest of her mother's life, the way her grandfather should have been able to, the way her grandmother's letter had been cut in half. Samuel became a lawyer and came back to Crimson Creek and served as the county judge for 22 years, and there was not a family in that county, rich or poor, that could buy a judgment out of Samuel Callahan. Because Samuel Callahan had been raised by Charlotte Hayes, and he knew what a bought judgment could do to a girl in a back pew. Emily Carter served her sentence. She came out quiet. She came out old. She had a son by a man she did not name, and she raised the boy alone in a small house at the edge of town, and the town let her alone. The town did not forgive her exactly. But the town had learned in the business of Charlotte Hayes that it had been wrong once about a woman in a pew, and it did not want to be wrong again. So the town let Emily Carter live her quiet life, and when she died in 1902 of a chest complaint in the winter, there were 4 people at her funeral. Her son, the new preacher, Mrs. Pratt, who was nearly 90 by then and could barely stand but came anyway because Mrs. Pratt had said at Charlotte's aunt's funeral that she would not miss another burial in that town, and she had kept her word, and Charlotte came. She stood at the back of the little graveyard in a black dress and a black bonnet, and she did not say a word, and she laid a single white flower on the grave, and she walked home. Ethan asked her that night gentle why she had gone. Because Charlotte said she was a girl once, and she was a girl who did a terrible thing. And the terrible thing took from her more than it took from me in the end. And I did not want her to go into the ground with nobody there but the preacher. Charlotte, she is with my aunt now, Ethan. My aunt is going to settle it with her. I do not need to. Ethan put his arms around her. Charlotte Callahan, he whispered, you are a better soul than this country deserves. I had help, she said. I had an aunt, and I had a mother before that, and I had you. Ethan died in the winter of 1921. He was 70 years old, and he had worked the Callahan Ranch for 45 years, and he died in his bed with his wife holding his hand, and his last words were not grand because he was not a grand man. His last words were, Charlotte, supper. Charlotte Callahan laid him down beside her aunt and her mother and her father on the hill above the little white church under the cottonwoods, and she lived another 9 years. In those 9 years, she sat in the front pew of the church every Sunday. Not the back, never the back again, and she taught Sunday school to the grandchildren of the children who had once whispered her down. And when she died in her sleep in the spring of 1930, at the age of 75, the town of Crimson Creek closed every shop on the main street for the funeral, and the preacher, a young man, the grandson of the preacher who had apologized in the pulpit 56 years before, stood up in front of the church and read the eulogy. This is the eulogy he read in part. Brothers and sisters, Charlotte Callahan is the reason this town can hold its head up. We were a town that whispered a woman down into a back pew once. We were a town that let lies stand in the light and truth sit in the dark. We were a town that would have hanged an innocent man on a cottonwood tree one summer night, and we would have done it over a lie told by a girl on a porch. And the woman we are burying today, she came home to us. She came home to a town that did not deserve her coming home. And she stayed. And she raised her children in our streets. And she taught our grandchildren their letters. And she sat in our front pew every Sunday, and she looked us in the eye, and she did not hold it over us, and she did not make us small for what we had done. She forgave us by living a good life in front of us brothers and sisters, which is the only kind of forgiveness that matters. She did not leave us a scandal. She left us a legacy. And if there is any child here today who has ever been whispered about any girl in any back pew of any church in this county, I want you to hear me. I want you to hear me, child. What they whispered about Charlotte Hayes in the summer of 1874 was a lie. And what they whispered about her was burned off her in broad daylight. And the woman they whispered about became the woman this whole town buried its heart in. Truth comes late sometimes, but it comes. And love when it stands its ground, love when a good man sits down on a back pew beside a crying woman and does not get up, love outlasts the lies. Every single time. Every last one. They buried her beside Ethan under the cottonwoods. The wind was warm. The church bell rang for her. It rang 31 times, one for every year she had taught school, because that was how they counted her in Crimson Creek. And when the last bell rang out over the ridge, and the sound of it was gone into the summer sky, the town of Crimson Creek stood in silence on the hill and remembered. They had whispered her down once. They had carried her up in the end. And in the back row of the little white church where Charlotte Hayes had once sat, alone in her mother's blue dress, while the town of Crimson Creek made up its mind about her, a young mother sat that Sunday with her little girl on her lap. And the little girl asked her mother who Charlotte Callahan had been. And the mother, a woman of about 30, a woman whose grandmother had been in the choir loft on the day of Charlotte's wedding, bent down and whispered the answer into her daughter's ear. She was a woman-child who came home. To this town. To this town. And they loved her mama. In the end, child. In the end, they loved her. And did she love them back, mama? The mother was quiet for a moment. Yes, baby, she said at last. She loved them back. She loved them back harder than they ever deserved. And that is why we sit in this church on a Sunday morning, child. That is the whole reason. Because of a woman who sat in this pew a long time ago and a cowboy who sat down beside her. What was the cowboy's name? Mama. Ethan Callahan, baby. And what was the woman's name? The mother smiled. She kissed her daughter's hair. Charlotte, she whispered. Her name was Charlotte Hayes, and she was the bravest woman this town has ever known. And she is the reason you are safe in this pew today. Do not ever forget it. I won't, Mama. Promise me, child. I promise. And that little girl did not forget, and her daughter did not forget. And the story of Charlotte Hayes, the woman who cried in the back of the church while they whispered, and the cowboy who sat down beside her, was told in the town of Crimson Creek for 100 years after, not as a scandal, but as a truth, and not as a warning, but as a gift. Because truth may arrive late in this world, and love may pay a heavy price to stand its ground. But when a good woman comes home to a town that does not deserve her, and when a good man sits down beside her in the back pew on a summer Sunday and refuses to get up, the whole world changes. Quietly. For good. Forever. And nothing the whisperers do can ever take it back.